thank you for joining us for today's webinar. As you'll see, we're going to be getting acquainted with Glooko. Today, we're going to cover several things. First of all, we're going to start with who we are. Who is Glooko? What are we trying to achieve? What is happening with this upgrade? Who's it going to affect? And we're also going to be looking at Glooko in greater detail, both how it differs from Diasend, as well as some of the graphs and charts within the platform, and some of the benefits that it is going to provide to both clinics and patients. We're also going to touch on the support that is available for clinics as they make this upgrade. So we are going to have people supporting you every step of the way. There's going to be plenty of resources to assist you. And finally, as I said, we're going to round out with a Q&A where we'll address any questions that you've inputted throughout the duration of this webinar. So, first of all, who are Glooko? What are we achieving? So, Glooko has a range of digital health solutions functioning across many countries. You'll see we're operating in over 26 countries, and we really function to connect people with diabetes with their healthcare professionals. We bring a multitude of different data sources together, enabling telehealth, enabling clinical research, and really improving collaboration between both clinicians and patients. You can see from the slide here that we have over 1 million active patients using Glooko's solutions, and that's actually in over 7,500 clinics. So we're doing some fantastic work, and the Glooko platform is really at the forefront of diabetes management. Now, what is happening? We are upgrading from Diasend to Glooko. Glooko provides us with additional flexibility and allows us to innovate moving forward. And it is really going to allow us to provide as much value as possible to both clinics and patients. And for that reason, this transition is going to affect both healthcare professional users and their patients as well. So everyone is going to be upgrading throughout this process. So we're going to have an overview of Glooko, and then I'm going to jump into a live demonstration as well. So how does Glooko differ from Diasend? As you'll see here, they are very, very similar. Many of the same features and even similar reports are available within Glooko, which makes it very easy to transition. But with Glooko, we get that added flexibility and additional capabilities which allow us to develop features and continue to improve way into the future, which is all about providing the maximum value that we can to both healthcare professionals and patients as we continue to proceed. You'll see with Glooko, we are all about uploading and sharing data securely from home or in clinic. And this can be done in several ways, whether using a mobile phone, the Glooko mobile app, using the web app on a normal web browser, or again, we have in-clinic solutions such as the Glooko transmitter. Now, we're easily able to upload over 95% of diabetes devices. This covers a range of blood glucose meters, CGMs, insulin pumps, connected insulin pens. We have activity trackers, and we're even looking at introducing more devices as we move forward, which will cover even more different types of data. We bring all this data together and consolidate it in a variety of reports and charts, which really allow both healthcare professionals and patients to delve deep into the data and gain actionable insights. Now, sharing of the data reports between healthcare professionals and patients really helps to facilitate meaningful interactions between patients and their healthcare professionals, and also helps to enable remote monitoring as well, which just improves clinic efficiencies further. Now, there's loads of different graphs and charts within the Glooko platform. Some of them are listed here, and that's everything from summaries to overviews, logbooks, and we even have some unique reports in here, such as insights. Now, I'm going to jump into a live demo now, and we're actually going to look at some of these reports in greater detail. So once you navigate to glooko.com and you've entered your username and password and log in, you will find the first screen that you are presented is the Assign Devices tab. Now, this is very similar to the Clinic tab within Diasend, where we find all of the uploads that have been done via our Clinic transmitter. Now, you'll see here that we have the name of a device that has been uploaded, we have the category, such as meter, the serial number. We can also see the time that it was uploaded and the serial number of the transmitter that it was uploaded from. So then, as we continue along this line, we have the ability to assign it to a specific patient. Now, this is where there is a slight difference between Glooko and Diasend. As you see with Glooko, we actually assign every single upload. So it gives us that extra bit of control. So we can either assign this upload to this patient who has been using this device previously, or we can assign it to another patient. Now, if we select another patient, we would fill out this form seen on the screen here, and we will either find the patient if they already exist within our patient list, or we can create a new patient simply by filling out this form. But for the sake of argument, we're going to assign this to the patient that was previously using the device. Now you'll see once we do that, we have the ability to either unassign the device or we can create a PDF report. So you'll see here from the PDF wizard, it's very similar to what is available in Diasend. However, it's a little bit more detailed and a bit more user-friendly. You are able to select the various time periods that you would like to report on, and you can select the individual graphs that you would like to include. And you'll see that we get a summary of the number of pages that will be included in the final report. In this case, we have a total report length of 38. And you can then create this PDF and attach it to a patient's electronic medical record, which is great for providing additional context to any notes that have been documented there. Now, where this does differ from Diasend is we have some drop downs at the top of the screen. Now, using each of these drop downs, we can actually streamline the list that we see here. So perhaps we only want to look at blood glucose meters, or maybe just insulin pumps. And this means that for those larger clinics that have many uploads, perhaps multiple Glooko transmitters, they can actually go through and select just the transmitter that healthcare professional is working with. So for instance, if you have several different clinics running, perhaps an outpatient clinic, maybe you've got a gestational clinic as well, you could then select the specific transmitter where uploads are being done for your clinic, as well as the particular types of devices that you're working with. So it just keeps this interface really clean for any healthcare professionals that are using it. If we do create a new patient profile and assign a device to that profile, we have the option to enter the patient's email address. This will automatically send that patient an email inviting them to download the Glooko mobile app and share their data with your clinic from home. So similar to how you invite patients within Diasend, however, rather than going to the Invite tab and entering the patient's email address, in Glooko, it's all automatic once you've added the details of the patient to the patient profile. When we register a patient, you'll see that from the Patients tab, all of our registered patients are listed here. And you have the ability to resend invites as well. If a patient hasn't yet created a profile and activated their Glooko account, you can either input or edit their email address. Perhaps you previously sent it to the wrong email address, and this will allow you to resend that invite. Next, you can see when the patient last uploaded their data, so you get a good understanding of who has uploaded, who hasn't, and maybe touch base with the patients that haven't uploaded in a while. Maybe we haven't got a good record for their data recently. And then next is a feature that has definitely been in high demand. I know I had many clinics ask for this, and this is tags. What this allows you to do is tag individual patients in a multitude of different ways. So if you click on the edit icon shown here and click on add tag, you have the ability to select each of the professional users on the clinic account. So each of the healthcare professionals that are using the platform, maybe this patient is managed by a particular group of clinicians. Or you can even add your own tags. So you could add, for instance, a tag to say that this is a gestational patient, maybe they're type 1, maybe they get seen at a specific site or specific clinic within the hospital. Or maybe you want to add a therapy. So perhaps this person is using an insulin pump. We want to say that they're on pump therapy. You can see here that I have this patient is allocated to their healthcare professional and they're on MDI therapy, multiple daily injections. And then we have another patient further down that is labeled as being part of our gestational clinic. And the great thing about these tags is clinics have full control to edit and create these as they see fit. And you're even able to filter the patient list based on these. So if you just wanted to see all your patients for a particular clinic or a particular type of therapy, you can do that quite easily by just ticking the appropriate boxes. And then you can clear those at the top of the screen by just cancelling the selections as shown. You can also create patient accounts from this screen by using the link at the top and filling out the form as shown. Next, we're going to touch on some of the features of the clinic account itself. So, how you would actually go about controlling the clinic account and maybe altering the settings. If we go to the top right and go to settings, you'll see that we have several sections. So, first of all, I can actually change my professional designation, I can update my name, and as we go down, we have some account information. So I can change my email address and password and so on, as well as enable two-step verification, which is an increased level of security and will mean that a healthcare professional will receive a code to their email when they try to log in, and they'll be required to enter that code in order to log into the platform. This is required by some teams, but that is where you would activate it. As we continue to scroll down, you can select the different units that you like to operate in, and also whether you would like manually entered blood glucose readings into an insulin pump to actually be presented within the statistics as well. That's quite useful if you do want manually entered readings included in the reports that you view. Next, we have terminal settings. Now, this is incredibly useful because it allows us to actually name each of our transmitters. So perhaps this one is in a particular clinic. So maybe this is for Dr. Smith's clinic. And then if we click save, and then we navigate back to the previous screen that we were looking at where we had assigned devices, you'll now see that the upload will show up as being done via Dr. Smith's transmitter, which again makes it easier when filtering on the transmitters and allows you to name each transmitter, perhaps on where it's based around the hospital, the clinics it's used in, etc. Now I'm going to change that back so as I don't forget. Next, we have, as we scroll down, our favorite PDFs. So we can create PDF reports that are standardized and use across patients consistently. So for instance, if we have a report that we use with maybe our type 1 patients that are on pumps, or maybe type 1s that are using insulin pens, or maybe we have a typical report that we run during an annual review, we can set all of those up here. We click New Favorite, we can name the report itself, and then select the appropriate graphs and charts we would like included. Now, that is it as far as the settings for the clinic goes. Next, we actually have managing the clinic. Now, this is where we decide access for professional users. Now, we can add professional users by clicking Add New Professional User and putting in the person's information. This would be another member of your clinical team. You'll see that they will then receive an email. And from the list shown on screen, you can see that, for instance, here we have Josephine, and she was sent an email to activate her account, but she hasn't done it yet. So we have pending activation, and we can resend that activation email if we wish. Once a user is active, it will actually show that their account is active here as well. And we can remove people from the account, and we also have a full audit trail. So we can see here, for instance, Joe has been removed from the account, but we can see when he was removed, so we have a record of who has access at any given time. We're also able to enable two-step verification, which is again useful for that added level of security. So that's as far as it goes from a clinic's point of view. What I'm going to do is jump into another account to actually look at some of the reports, so the actual patient profiles. We're going to view some data. Now, the same with Diasend, whether you're viewing a patient profile as a patient or as a clinician, the patient profile always looks the same. So it's the same view for both clinicians and patients. You'll see that we start on the summary tab, and we have the ability to select multiple time frames from 2 weeks, 90 days, and even custom time ranges. And we can switch between blood glucose and CGM. You'll see, looking at 2 weeks of blood glucose data, we have the results sorted in brackets from very low to very high, and we have the values defined here on the right hand side, as well as some of the statistical information, such as the lowest result if we wanted to have a look at the hypos within this period of time. As we scroll down, we have each of these within kind of bi-hourly blocks throughout the day, so we can see the time of day that the person has the best control and perhaps areas where they require more support. And we can switch that over to time of day to actually see, again, if there's areas of the day that they're maybe struggling with control. We can see the number of readings and averages and how much variation there is within each of these time blocks. Alternatively, we can go to days of the week and see if there's days of the week where there is perhaps better control, maybe look at things like behaviors and lifestyle decisions that are affecting blood glucose here as well. By clicking over to CGM, we have the top section is very similar. However, we do have the percentage of time that a CGM was active. And if we continue to scroll, we can also see an AGP, an ambulatory glucose profile, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but shows a statistical distribution of results over this 2 week period, but all condensed down to a standard 24 hours. So on here, you can see the dark blue line there representing the median, and then the various shaded portions showing the distribution of results over this period of time. Now, on the right-hand side of this chart, you'll see that we have information relating to insulin, diet, and also a history of events as well. So if we start with insulin, you'll see that we have the average units of basal that have been given per day, and also the same for bolus, and then the percentage split between basal and bolus. This provides an interesting insight for healthcare professionals. If using a connected pen, you'll see the brand of insulin that is being used here. And if using a pump, you can usually see the percentage of overrides as well. So if a patient has followed the advice given by the pump itself, whether that be through the bolus calculator, this does depend on different devices and which data we have available from them. Next, we have the diet section, where we have the number of carbohydrates that have been recorded per day, and actually the number of entries. So we can see if someone is carbohydrate counting. And then the section below, we have history. Now, this is fantastic as it shows a range of different events that the patient has had recorded through their devices and even manually entered through the Glooko app itself. You'll see we have blood glucose readings, we have boluses, we have carbohydrates recorded. We can see that this person has even synced an external platform to display their weight. And then if we use the filter at the top, we can filter on a whole range of different parameters, whether those be blood pressure, food, weight, so on. You'll see that we also have notes here. And this was, again, a frequently requested feature on Diasend. And what this will mean is that patients can use the Glooko app and they can actually input notes. So if at a particular time they're struggling with control and they want to reflect on it during their next consultation, they can enter a note via their app. And then when they go to their next consultation, the clinician can actually filter on notes and review all of those notes with the patient and look up those specific days and look at the graphs for them and really guide the patient through what was happening in each situation and just explore those the areas that a patient has struggled with more deeply with them. Next, we're going to go on to the graphs tab. Now, unlike Diasend, Glooko always presents data from multiple sources at the same time. It brings data together. And you'll see here, if we go over to CGM, we're going to cycle back to find a good time period where we have a decent amount of data to review. Here you go. So we have CGM data on screen. We have readings that are above target range, shown here in orange, within target are within green, and below target is the red readings shown here. We have proportionally sized bars showing carbohydrates, and then we have proportionally sized bars showing the insulin that has been recorded for each day. Now you'll see that the insulin bars then split further, if this is possible, to show bolus and basal. Now if we were to pick a particular day, maybe this one here, and we hover over that, we can see additional information, such as the median glucose for the day, the average number of results above, within, and below target range, the number of carbs that have been recorded, and then also insulin data. However, if we click on that day itself, rather than just hover, you'll see that we go into the overview, but only for a single day. So where we started on overview for a 2-week period, we're now on overview, but just for a single day. You'll see we have the CGM profile again, but this time it is actually accompanied by blood glucose readings. Now you'll see some of these have a grey outline to them. That indicates that they are manually entered within the within the insulin pump itself, whereas some of these, such as this one here, do not have a grey outline to them. And that indicates that they were directly from the blood glucose meter that this patient is using. You can see that all of these are color-coded, and below that we have the carbohydrates that have been documented throughout the day. Below carbohydrates, we have the bolus information. Now you'll see for each of these boluses, again, they are represented by proportionally sized bars and color-coded accordingly. If we hover over a bolus, you can actually see the amount that was delivered and the exact time that that dose was delivered. However, you'll see that some of the bolus doses, such as these earlier in the day, have a little arrow partway through the column, and that arrow can either point up or down. And in this case, it points up. And what that shows is more insulin was delivered than was suggested by the pump itself. Now, when using an insulin pump, you actually see the full calculation behind the dose. So when you hover, you can see that this bolus coincided with 26 grams of carbs. And for that meal, the pump recommended 2.85 units of insulin. And then it also recommended a correction of 0.65 units, but recognizes that there was insulin on board, IOB, of 1.25 units of insulin. So once all that's added up and calculated, it gave a total suggested dose of 2.25 units. However, the patient using the pump actually delivered 3.5 units. So you can see here that they delivered more than was recommended by the pump. In the row below that, we have the basal rate, and you can see the continuous basal profile here, and the dotted line shows where the patient initiated a temporary basal rate. We also have things such as suspends on here. You can see that we have the red circle showing that a suspension occurred, and maybe this was a suspend and then a quick resume again. And you also see changes to the basal rate, so from 1.2, and then we have 1 again, a little later on, and then back to 1.2 as that profile does change. And as we cycle through other days, you'll see that there are symbols showing if we were to change the set or site of the pump, and also if we were changing the reservoir as well. So we have multiple different alerts and symbols showing how this patient has interacted with a pump. If this was a connected pen, we would actually see proportionally sized columns, similar to how we have with bolus, but indicating when a basal injection had been given. And again, you'd be able to hover over those to show the exact time that a basal dose had been given. Next, we have the overlay screen. Now, with overlay, we can cycle between blood glucose and CGM again, but you'll see working with CGM, if we set a longer time period, perhaps 30 days, we have the spaghetti graph, which is really a scatter graph and shows the highest readings and the lowest readings over this period of time. So maybe we've got very high readings here, so maybe we want to look more at September the 5th to see what occurred here. We also have this reading where we have September the 9th, and we have some other high readings later in the month. So for instance, that's September the 6th as well. So we can go and review these days. We can look at the control that led to this, the build-up that led to these high readings. And then as we also look at the bottom, we can find the lowest hypos throughout the month as well. And again, explore how a patient actually coped with these, what they did, were their actions correct, and did they manage each of these events appropriately. If we click over to the AGP, this will be a view that you're familiar with, where you can see, again, the statistical aggregation of this data over the 30 days that we're looking at, and then putting it into a standard 24-hour day. You can see that we actually have very consistent control. However, we can select using this row above the particular days that we would like to review in greater detail. Maybe we just want to look at control over a weekend. So we select Saturday and Sunday, and you can see that over this 30 days, we have 4 Saturdays worth of data and 4 Sundays. And then this is the AGP just for the weekend. Perhaps we instead want to look at the working week, or maybe while a pediatric patient is at school. Here we can see what that control looks like, and then go through the consultation accordingly, maybe exploring lifestyle factors, or maybe there's certain days that the patient does sports and the impact that that may be having on their blood sugars. So we can explore that again using the overlay tab. Next, we have the calendar tab, and this is again a very bird's eye view of multiple days worth of data. So if we cycle back and look at a previous period to get a good representation, you'll see here that we have CGM data, again shown with blood glucose information, carbohydrates that have been recorded, boluses, and basal insulin, if available. You'll notice, unlike the overview that we looked at previously, within the calendar you can actually see various symbols if using an insulin pump. You can see when there were alarms, when basal rate was suspended, where there were any set or site changes, and if the reservoir was refilled. You can then click into any of the days that are of interest and again view an overview for one day. And this is a very detailed view again for that particular day that we selected. So I hope you see that you can use these reports in multiple different ways. Rather than having a dedicated blood glucose tab, CGM, and insulin, we combined all of that data into a selection of different reports that you can really work with in whichever way is easiest for you. You can just stick to the overview tab or go to calendar if that's the easiest way for you to find days of interest. And as you become more familiar, you can branch out into the other reports that are available. Next, we have the logbook. Now, this logbook is used with an insulin pump, so there is going to be a lot of data shown on this. There'll be a lot of alarms and so on that are visualized. If I scroll down, you'll see here we have blood glucose readings that are color-coded. We have carbohydrates in gray. We have bolus doses and also the basal rate as well. You'll notice that when using an insulin pump, some of these boluses are also accompanied by additional symbols, such as this downward arrow. You'll see from the legend below that that actually indicates that part of the bolus was given as a correction. You'll see that some of the readings on here will also have another arrow next to them, as shown here, where we have a bolus of 2.4 units. We can see a downward arrow showing that it was a correction, but also another arrow showing that it was an override. So this was not following the advice given by the pump itself. You'll see that this logbook is probably the most complex that you're likely to encounter, If you were just using a blood glucose meter and maybe some connected insulin pens, this view would be significantly simpler. You would see less symbols and less data being shown. You'll notice that there are several different fonts displayed. For instance, this font, which appears in italics and almost handwritten, whereas we have this font below, which is a standard Arial font. You'll see that that italicized font that looks almost handwritten actually displays manually entered values. So all these blood glucose readings are manually entered blood glucose readings that were input into the pump itself. Whereas you can see that the insulin data came from the pump and was not manually entered. Therefore, it appears in a different font. That would not be applicable if you were just using a standard blood glucose meter and a connected pen, for example. But it is worth knowing that insulin pumps do display data in a very detailed form. Next, we have Insights. The Insights tab within Glooko is really powerful and includes some insulin pump reports that were not available within Diasend. Here, you would first set your time period, whether it's 30 days, 90 days, or a custom time range. And then once you've done this, you can choose to either review the set and site changes, the temporary basal decreases or suspends, or the temporary basal increases. Once you've made your selection, for this event, you'll see each occurrence of that event listed below. For instance, we can see that some of these events occur in the morning and others in the evening. And what this report does is it aligns all of these events, despite the fact they occur at different times of day. It aligns them all down this black line shown here on the right hand side. And we can see the blood glucose on the build up to that event and in the aftermath. So, for instance, we're looking at a set and site change. But if a patient's blood glucose was going very off course after they were to change the set or the site of their pump, then with that, what we'd be able to see is the blood glucose going either too high, too low, or certainly going off course after that event, if that was occurring. However, for this patient, we can see that generally, after they're changing their site, that blood glucose is remaining fairly stable. We may want to explore this, for instance, for temporary basal decreases and suspends. In this instance, we can see the blood glucose an hour before. So are they initiating the temporary basal decrease or suspend at the correct time? We can also see the duration. Each one of these blocks, indicated by the dotted line, is a 15-minute increment. So you can see, for instance, the top event was much shorter than the one shown at the bottom. You can see that whilst the temporary basal decrease or suspend was active, you can see the impact on the blood glucose, and then you can also see the blood glucose after that event was finished and after the normal basal was resumed. This is really useful in case you wanted to change temporary basal decrease settings within the pump and allows you to really fine tune an insulin pump to get the best results possible. Next, we have the Devices tab. On the Devices tab, you can find a list of all of the devices that are assigned to this patient, and you'll see that for insulin pumps, we're able to see the pump profiles, including the basal profiles. We can see the carb ratios, insulin sensitivities, and the blood glucose target ranges. And for some pumps, even the threshold at which we start administering correction doses. We're also able to go to the device settings and view things like the active insulin time, the meter units, and maximum boluses and basal rates. As with Diasend, we can use the drop down to reflect back on previous settings within the pump. If we've decided to update the settings and make changes to optimize control, but perhaps these haven't had the desired effect, we can look up the previous settings and revert back to those. You'll also see that next to this device we have a clock symbol, indicated here in orange. When we click on the device, you'll see that we actually have a figure at the top, +3. Now, this shows that the time on this device is 3 minutes fast compared to the time on the Glooko server. The Glooko server pulls the current time, and we can then see if these individual devices are set correctly. For instance, because this pump is running 3 minutes fast, its data is going to be slightly misaligned with the other devices that have been uploaded. Whilst 3 minutes isn't a huge difference, you can imagine if the clocks have gone forwards or backwards a day, that you would then see 24 hours in the section next to that. And 24 hours is obviously going to have a dramatic impact on any reports viewed within the Glooko platform. So it is important to correct the time on the devices that a patient is using. Next, we're going to have a look at the support that is available for you when upgrading to Glooko. Hopefully you found the live demonstration useful. I'm sure you'll agree there's some fantastic reports there that are going to provide a lot of value for consultations moving forwards. Before making the transition to the Glooko platform from Diasend, please do check that all of the devices that you are frequently using within clinic are compatible with Glooko. There is currently a small device gap between Diasend and Glooko, and we are continuously working to make sure that all devices that were compatible on Diasend will be compatible on Glooko. And we will soon have all of the devices compatible. However, please do check to see if this will affect you before you make the migration. If you want any further support when making this migration, you can get that from our support team. You can call them Monday to Friday between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. with any questions that you may have. Or alternatively, you can refer to our help centre, where we have a variety of helpful articles covering all areas of the transition, both from a personal and professional perspective, covering everything from compatibility to the various reports seen within the platform.